There's a phase in life where things feel almost too clear, not in a naive way, but in an intense way, as if everything had already found its place, as if the world made sense without much effort. You look at your life and it seems like you understand it. Who you are, where you're going, what all of this means. And quietly, without even noticing, a certainty begins to form. That somewhere ahead, there's a moment where everything will finally align. Not perfectly, but enough to feel stable, enough to feel resolved. And maybe this is where attachment begins. From that point, something subtle starts to happen. You begin to project your life forward. When I finish this, when I achieve that, when I become who I'm supposed to be. And each when carries a silent promise that something inside you will finally settle. So you move, you plan, you build your path based on that invisible point ahead. And without noticing, you don't just desire that future, you attach yourself to it. Not as a possibility, but as something that has to happen. Because now, it's not just about the future anymore. It's about the feeling that everything will finally make sense. But then, time moves, and something unexpected happens. That moment you were waiting for, it doesn't disappear, it shifts. What once felt like an arrival starts to look like just another step. And the place where everything was supposed to make sense quietly introduces new questions. Not abruptly, not dramatically, almost imperceptibly. And maybe the strangest part isn't that the certainty fades. It's that while it existed, it felt absolutely true. Not like an idea, not like a possibility, but like reality itself. And only later, with some distance, you begin to see something different. That the certainty was never in the world. It was in you. And when you start to see this, something shifts in the way you look at your own past. Because it means that many of the things you once held with absolute conviction were never fixed. They were temporary. Even when they felt solid, even when they felt unquestionable. They were shaped by who you were at that moment. Your references, your expectations, your emotional state, and maybe growing, is not about accumulating more certainty. Maybe it's about realizing that some of them don't hold. That what once felt obvious no longer fits the same way. And this is where something subtle begins to appear. Because when a certainty starts to crack, attachment reveals itself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but as resistance, a quiet need to hold on to what once made you feel stable, even if it no longer fits who you're becoming. And if there is one kind of certainty that feels even harder to question, it's the one that comes from emotion. Because some things you don't decide to believe, you just feel them. And that feeling alone seems to be enough. There's a very specific moment when this happens. Someone enters your life, or a connection slowly deepens. And without much effort, you begin to sense that something is different. Not just special, but permanent, as if there was something there that couldn't break. And the strange thing is, this certainty doesn't need arguments. It doesn't need proof. It sustains itself through intensity. You feel it, and that feeling becomes truth. And maybe, in that moment, it really is true. But here is where attachment quietly begins. Because without noticing, you're no longer just experiencing something. You're holding on to it, trying to preserve it, trying to make it last exactly as it is. As if intensity was enough to guarantee permanence. But time doesn't make agreements, and slowly, almost without warning, something begins to change. Not in a dramatic way. It's subtle. A shift in rhythm, a growing distance, a feeling that something is no longer as intense as before. And what once felt unbreakable begins to show small fractures, until one day, you notice it. It's not the same anymore. And maybe the hardest part is not the change itself, but the contrast, the distance between what felt eternal and what couldn't remain. Because the feeling was real. The intensity existed. It was lived deeply. And still, it changed. And this is where something deeper can be seen. Not everything that is true is meant to last. Some experiences are not here to stay. They are here to pass through you, to shape you, to move something inside you, and then to leave space. As Anandamayi Ma once expressed, everything in this world is passing, only the divine remains. And maybe attachment begins when we try to hold what was never meant to stay still. And the strange thing is, not all the certainties you carry started with you. Some of them were already there, before you even had the chance to question anything. They were in the way you were raised, in the conversations you heard, without even noticing, in the values that repeated themselves over and over again, until they stopped sounding like opinions and started feeling like truth. They didn't arrive as questions. They arrived as answers. And maybe that's why they settled so deeply. Because when something comes too early, it finds no resistance. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply fits. It organizes itself inside you and becomes part of how you see the world. What is right? What is wrong? What matters? What doesn't? All of it once felt definitive, but not because you chose it, because you absorbed it. And for a long time, this goes unnoticed. You grow up believing that your certainties are yours, that every belief was built through conscious choice. There is a sense of authorship, as if every conviction came from you. But then, something begins to shift. Sometimes it's an experience. Sometimes it's a rupture. Sometimes it's just time. And what once felt natural starts to feel strange. A belief that once felt unquestionable begins to create discomfort. A value that once felt solid starts to feel relative. And this moment is quiet, but it opens something. A crack. Because for the first time, you begin to see that what you were holding as truth might not have been a choice. And that can feel deeply uncomfortable. Because questioning a certainty is not just changing an idea. It is touching identity. And maybe this is where attachment hides the most. Not in things, but in the ideas you believe you are. There is something almost invisible that begins to happen when you stop holding everything so tightly. Not all at once, not as a decision, but as a subtle loosening. As if little by little life no longer needed to fit inside your definitions. And maybe this is where something deeper begins. Because attachment is not only about people or outcomes or things. It is also about the way you hold your own certainties. The way you cling to ideas of who you are, of what should happen, of how life is supposed to unfold. And when you begin to see this, not intellectually but directly, something shifts. Because now you don't need to destroy your certainties. You don't need to reject your feelings. You just don't need to become them. There is a quiet freedom in that. A freedom that doesn't come from knowing, but from not needing to know everything. A freedom that doesn't come from control, but from realizing that control was never complete to begin with. And maybe this is what growing really feels like. Not becoming more certain, but becoming more open. Not holding more tightly, but learning when to let go. As Anandamayi Ma once expressed, everything belongs to God, nothing belongs to you. And maybe this is not something to believe, but something to feel, slowly. Because when nothing truly belongs to you, not even your certainties, what remains is not emptiness, it is space. A space where life can move, change, transform, without needing your permission. And maybe, just maybe, that was never a problem. Maybe the strange thing was believing that anything could be held forever. So now, nothing needs to be forced into permanence. You can experience fully without needing to keep. You can feel deeply without needing to hold. You can live without needing to conclude. And maybe that's enough. Axis Soul.